Hey, what's up, everybody? You know what time it is. Your boy Jeffrey L. Boney here for another hot edition of Real Talk Junkies Live. Make sure you share the link, y'all, with all your friends, your family members, those you like, those you don't like. It doesn't matter. They need to hear this important conversation as we always bring to you the most important discussion points and topics out here, man, that you need to know about, you need to be familiar with, you need to be aware of so that we can improve our lives and improve our community. Here today, man, we're going to be having a conversation about something that is kind of taboo for a lot of people. We don't like to talk about death. We don't like to talk about the things related to death, someone dying, someone having to deal with the aspects of death, like the family and others. But it's a very, very important topic. Going back to May 25th, 2020, all of us were in awe and in shock when we saw the video on that Memorial Day of one of our own here in Houston that went to Jack Yates High School, that was from Third Ward, from the CUNY homes. I'm talking about none other than George Perry Floyd Jr. And, you know, it was definitely shocking to see on video this police officer, Derek Chauvin, place his knee on his neck for over 9 minutes, to the point where on video we see him lose his life. It was definitely shocking. It was something that I cannot get out of my mind, especially, you know, knowing who George Perry Floyd Jr. was, being that I went to school with him at Ryan Middle School as well as Yates High School. So it was definitely shocking, especially when I found out, man, oh man, that's Big Floyd that this is happening to, or that this happened to. And little did his family know, or anyone know, that he would lose his life on that day. So immediately the family had to, beyond the grief, beyond the emotion, had to deal with the final rites of his passing along. And so with that being said, they had to find a funeral home, someone that could help deal with the body. And you know, they reached out to one of our, you know, profound funeral homes in the greater Houston area, none other than Fort Bend Memorial Planning Center. And that's owned by none other than my guest today. And here to talk about not only that scenario, but also the importance of dealing with handling your aspects of death and preparing for that. You know, again, it's a taboo subject, but we got to talk about it, y'all. It's very, very, very important. Each and every one of you, again, share the link. Here to talk about that is none other than my friend Bobby, Mr. Fort Bend Swearington. Come on Real Talk Junkies today, man. Good to see you today, bro. All right, man. All right. Welcome to Real Talk Junkies.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right. So, you know, I teed it up a little bit, Bobby, and talked about, you know, how you all were entrusted by the family of George Floyd
Yes, sir.
to deal with the body. And not only did you handle that, the services and the body for the services that were held here in Houston, you also did it in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and in North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
And so I just want to kind of go back a little bit and talk about how did you get selected, you and your firm, to handle the remains. Is that right? The remains?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You
okay,
said it
I
right.
want to make sure.
Thank
you know.
First off, thank you for having me today, man. It's truly an honor to be here with you today. We were selected by the Floyd family because we had worked with their extended family before, maybe about a year and a half when we first opened up in 2017. So about 3 years before that, we serviced their extended family. And the words that we received from them were, we want a service similar to what we had done prior for them. And so we just, from that point, we took the reins to try to facilitate, put together a service, multi-city service, multi-state for the family.
Now, so when you got the call to do that, did you understand the impact or the brevity of what you would be undertaking? I mean, before actually, you know, getting involved in?
No, I didn't. Generally, when you are contacted by a family, you're contacted by the next of kin, who is normally, you know, a father, mother, sister, brother, wife, child. In this instance, Mr. Floyd's services were put together by his first cousins. And so when I initially received that call, just being honest, I didn't necessarily take it as serious. And at that point, I received the call the day after Mr. Floyd passed away. So it hadn't got as much traction by that time. But maybe by about the third or fourth day, when they were still in contact with me, and I received a call from the cemetery confirming that we were the funeral home handling the services. That's at that point, that's when I started taking things like, oh wow, this is real.
Yeah. So at this third or fourth day, you had already seen like a lot of the news
I had
coverage.
seen the news coverage. The coverage was ramping up. You were seeing press conferences. Attorney Crump had gotten involved by that time. Reverend Sharpton had gotten involved. And so by about the third or fourth, fifth day, that's when we knew that this was going to be a major deal.
And then I started seeing where Floyd Mayweather,
yes, sir,
wanted to provide some resources
definitely,
towards it.
Definitely.
I think there was like a white horse drawn.
Oh man, I think that
walk us through
it was
service,
a lot.
the services.
We were contacted by the family. So once we got everything solidified on our end, we worked in correlation with our collaboration rather with the funeral home in Minnesota, which is Estes Funeral Chapel. Very nice people there. They were very warm, very welcoming. They allowed us to come in and do what we needed to do. And then from there, because of Delta, we were able to travel from
Delta
Minneapolis.
Airlines,
Delta Airlines gave us a private jet.
I really know you're talking about Delta Sigma Theta.
Oh no! I forgot who I'm sitting with.
Or the variant Delta.
No. This is Delta Airlines. Delta Airlines. They were a great partner with us, ensuring the safety of Mr. Floyd's remains, and traveling from Minnesota to the Carolina to.
So why did they have one in Carolina?
Because he had a great deal of his family was there in North Carolina.
Okay.
And so they wanted to make sure we did it in Minneapolis to give the immediate public and everyone there, because this is such a traumatic experience and so much unrest at the moment was going on. So we wanted to give the family, or the people in that community closure. Give them a chance to express their, condolences. Of course, there was so much outrage, so much. They were
emotionally, just
emotionally. I think people didn't know how to react,
right?
Because you had never seen a situation like that where the person's life was taken on camera,
right?
It wasn't like he was shot or anything like that. This was actually a video of a person taking the life from a person with their knee on their neck. So you physically literally watch the breath leave his body on there. So I think that's what made it such a big deal. So we wanted to make sure, and then keep in mind in Minneapolis during that time, there was so much rioting going on.
Mm-hmm.
So Estes Funeral Chapel was maybe 2 blocks away from the police station, right?
Mm-hmm.
At that police station, it had been boarded up and closed down because there was so much rioting going on. And so in our minds, with us giving them the opportunity to show their respects, maybe that would possibly, bring some of that down. And then so we took it from Minneapolis to North Carolina, where we worked with a Bowie Funeral Home in North Carolina, and then brought him home for what we call the grand finale.
Mm. And that was held right here at the Fountain of Praise.
At the Fountain of Praise, Reverend Dr. Remus E. Wright, co-pastor Mia K. Wright.
Yeah. So let's go back to 2017. You said that's when you kicked off.
That's when we
Fort Bend Memorial Planning Center.
Yes, sir.
Is that the official name?
Yes, Fort Bend Memorial Planning Center.
So you started that. So how did you get into I want to be in the funeral business?
I'll tell you this.
Because you're 34?
34. I'll be 35 on May 5th. And this is my 22nd year in the business.
So wait a minute. You're 34, soon to be 35, and this is your 22nd
22nd
year.
Jeff. Don't let him go past that part, Jeff.
So 22 years to be the peanut gallery in the back.
Thank y'all so much, y'all. So kind, too kind.
But no, seriously, 22 years of that means you got involved at the age of 12.
Yes, sir. I was actually a school bus would drop me off at the mortuary after school.
So your family was in the business,
sir.
or what?
So I'm from a small town, Fresno and Arcola, and I'm from. I was there when it was no development, none of the the subdivisions they have out there. So we had a young lady came to town, and she was opening a funeral home, and she was going to the various churches in the town, just introducing herself. And so she saw me. I'm an organist. I grew up playing the organ and the piano. And so she saw me and she was like, man, it'd be nice to get you to come play at the funeral home sometimes. And so I was like, man, I've always wanted to work at a funeral home. So she brought me in. I was 12 or 13, started me playing services. As I got older, she then moved me to working services as an attendant. And from there, I moved into the office. I became the operations manager. I went to school.
Now, hold on, wait. What were you doing at 12?
At 12, I was playing the organ.
No, I'm talking about at the funeral home.
I was playing the organ, and she allowed me to come in.
So for the services, you was playing the organ at 12 years old?
Yes, sir. Yes,
how'd you learn how to play the organ?
I came up under Shirley Joyner. She was the
All About Music.
Yeah, All About Music. I said All About Music too, and Rosharon. She had one way out there by the jail. And so
what was the name of the choir?
Southeast
Inspiration.
Yeah, Southeast Inspiration.
That's where I first got turned on to Yolanda.
Oh yeah. So she was
there
in
Outreach, Michigan.
Yeah, Outreach over there on Jutland.
Yeah.
And so I started with her, and it was me and my two brothers.
And her daughter, Reese.
Reese, I love Miss Reese, Miss Stephanie, all of them. Miss Joyner was very hard on me, and I have a natural ear for music. So I would just want to come in and just play the gospel songs. She was like, no, you got to play your classical music first before you can start. So I did that or whatever. So under her, I was able to develop my ear, which made me attractive to people who wanted, to hear music. So I started playing the services about 12 or 13, but by 15 or 16, I was dressing bodies. I was attending on services. I basically became her personal assistant.
So let me ask you this. At that age, tell me about the first body that you saw and how did you feel? I mean, what was your view of it?
Well, I'll tell you this.
Because death, even the word, we don't like to talk about it. It's so taboo. And it's like
that's because of just you hear so many wild and crazy stories about it, right? And I can tell you that those stories are not true.
All right.
So
tell me about the first time you was 15.
Yeah, about 14, 15. That wasn't the first time I saw a body. As soon as she got me working in the chapel, I started seeing bodies. Right. So
you weren't scared?
No, not really. And I think I guess that's how you know that it was my calling, because death doesn't scare me.
Yeah.
In 1999, my great grandfather passed away at like 92, 93. And we had just left the house from being there with him, and we got a call maybe 2 hours later that he had passed away. So granted, we're out here in Arcola, Fresno, Rosharon. The funeral home was located in Acres Home. So you see how long that ride is. So we sat out there with my grandfather for about 3 hours, and I laid in the bed with him. And, I kind of pulled him together because he had fallen off the bed. So I put him back in the bed. We kind of folded his hands, and I laid there with him the entire time until the funeral home arrived to pick up his body. So that was in 99. So then you fast forward to about 2000, 2001, I started working in a funeral home. So like dead bodies and things like that, I always tell people, you have to worry about the living people. It's not really the dead people that you have to be concerned with. It's the people who are living and walking around you. So that's how I kind of
they definitely can do more damage.
Oh man. I think everything that has to do with death is going to be in your mind.
Yeah.
But they can't physically do anything to you. The body is just a shell.
Yeah, but so going back to that then. So at 14, 15, you say you dressed.
Yes, sir.
But so you got to help me with this terminology.
Okay.
What does that mean, you dressed?
So prepared them. So basically, after embalming, then I would come in and
what's the
dress
embalming?
them. So embalming is the preservation of a body. It's a process in which the blood is removed and it is replaced with formaldehyde or embalming fluid. And the formaldehyde and embalming fluid basically preserves the body, so that what we see is an embalmed body. When you see view a body, they have been embalmed.
Okay, so is that why sometimes the body be looking different, like the people look
let me tell you about that. So when it comes to the way the body looks, I feel like people these days pick funeral homes based on, and this is actually a segue into what we were talking about, they pick funeral homes based on cost. Which is, I don't understand that. I do understand it on one side, but on the other side, I don't understand how one of the most important services that you can handle for your loved one to honor their memory can be diminished to who has the cheapest cost. And a lot of that comes from because people are non-insured, underinsured, and because they don't have the financial means to pay for funerals because they're not cheap, they begin to, we call them price shoppers. So they call funeral home to funeral home, seeing who has the best price. But when it comes to the appearance of the body, it is definitely based upon the embalmer, the skill of the embalmer. Of course, the circumstances of the death, of course, but it's up to the funeral home and the embalmer and the funeral directors and the people who get the body together to make sure that they are able to look as close to their living self as possible.
Yeah, so I mean, I think JJ and Ryan, I think that black folks the only ones that ask certain questions like who got the body.
Who got the body? Yeah.
I don't think there's no other group in America in the world that asks who got the body.
Well, you got to also think about it, man. There are more black funeral homes than anything. So you got to ask who has the body. In Hispanic cases, you have 5, 7 funeral homes, so you kind of know where they're going. Black funeral homes, I think we have over 50 in Houston.
50?
Yeah.
Wow.
Black funeral homes are almost like churches out here. Black funeral homes, black churches, you just see a bunch of them.
Why are there so many?
In my honest opinion, leadership, and I don't think that we have necessarily been taught to build teams. So back in the day, family-owned funeral homes were for their family. And if you had an outsider who wanted to get into the business, it was very hard for them. So instead of them, just working at that family-owned funeral home, they decide to leave and start their own funeral home. That's also negatively impacted our market because what they tend to do is once they start their own funeral home, then they slash the prices. And so then you have families who are now conditioned to price shop instead of our lighter counterparts. They call the funeral home and they're like, what's the price? Okay, we on the way.
Yeah. It's some again, going back to black folk, we judge the success of the funeral home based on how the deceased look.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, who gonna do her hair?
Yeah.
We've had that. Her hair look good.
We've had that a lot. We've had that a lot. I feel like it is based on, in my opinion, it should be based on the service that you guys have seen, prior to from that funeral home. Because a lot of times it's very hard for a person to have lost their mother, lost their father, lost someone close to them, and walk up to a casket and they're not able to recognize who is in the casket. Now, granted, there are extreme circumstances where you have people who have been in accidents, a prolonged sickness, they've been on ventilators and things. People don't know how harmful ventilators are to a body as well. But there are extreme cases, but generally a body should look mostly like what they have looked, as they were living. So there are some funeral homes that are better than others. And thankfully, if you go through our reviews and things online.
Yeah, I was going to say, where do y'all rank?
Oh, we are at the top. We're at the top. I can honestly say that, and that's not us even being cocky.
Yeah.
I tell people I built a brand out of a building. I have a very large building, but if you pass by that building, you wouldn't think it was a funeral home. We don't do any marketing other than social media. But all our clients are return clients. They're all, hey, you did such and such. We went to this funeral home. More specifically, how we secured the services for Mr. Floyd. So, I'm sure there were a lot of funeral homes here in Houston, older funeral homes that probably would have expected to get that service. But we were able to secure that service, and Mr. Floyd services can definitely go down as one of the most expensive funeral services of our time, for sure.
So, I'm gonna get into the pricing and things, in a minute, and the costs surrounding it. But I want to go back to you starting your actual business in 2017. So you started at the age of 2. Playing the organ at 3. No, I'm just teasing. But so when you got into it at 12 years of age and started playing the organ at some of the services and started, dressed your first body 15. So now fast forward, what made you want to actually start your own funeral home versus just working for it already existing?
Man, I'll tell you this. I never planned on owning my own funeral home.
Okay.
So, excuse me. Though I've had the desire for most of my life to work in a funeral home, I never desired to own a funeral home. I was so tight with where I was, and I was so committed to the brand and the growing of that brand. I never thought, hey, I'm gonna have my own funeral home one day. I was so close with my owner, so I figured that I was gonna be here forever.
Yeah.
But life events, transpired, And I frame it like this. I tell people, you know how when a child is has gotten too old to stay in his mother's house?
Yeah.
And so instead of disrespecting my mama, I just went and got my own house.
Yeah.
So that's how that situation went.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's like you saying something, but you ain't really saying it. So, I mean, this is Real Talk Junkies. So, I mean, I don't know how deep you want to go with
Man,
this.
hey, I at this age, I'm 35. I sound it's young, but I say what I want to say.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a situation where I had a desire and a vision for where I wanted to go. And
Wait a minute. That you wanted to go as a part of that particular business?
How I thought that things should be handled, things should, go. And there was just a difference in opinion and perspective. And because we were so close at that time, I did not want to be that person who took away from the vision or dream of somebody else. Because that though I had been there with her since the inception, that was not my vision. So I can't come into somebody else's house and change, no matter how closely tied I am to that vision. So and it wasn't anything like just crazy that happened. I tell entrepreneurs all the time, listen to your spirit, and your spirit is really going to push you where you need to go. I took off. There was an incident at the mortuary in 2014, and I took off for about 2 months. And I just kind of sat around and thought about what am I going to do now? Because I've been doing this so long, man. I don't know how to do anything else. By this time, I'm like 27, 28. I'm like, I don't know what else I'm going to do. I'm putting all my time and energy into the funeral business. And people had begun to take note of the work that I did. So I had a pastor in the city, Reverend Dr. Mose Jones, reach out to me. And he said, man, I heard that you're no longer at your funeral home. I heard you're interested in starting a funeral home. I want you to come by. I want to talk to you. I went by and talked to him, and he gave me my first check to start open. I was like, this man, honestly, Dr. Jones had known me for a while, had known of me, but was not, in my close circle. But there were certain aspects of my funerals that he would see on photo, and he was, he really liked it. I was one of the first, if not the first, funeral home in the city to introduce Mercedes-Benz printers into the funerals. Of course, everybody was so traditional coming out here from the South. They were like, oh, those are buses. Those are buses. I was able to, I don't know if you're familiar with the Prince family here.
Yeah, Jay Prince.
Miss Carla Blackman. She's the mother of Jazz Prince. She had these printers, and we were at a family gathering. And I walked out one day. I said, man, those are nice. Man, I can't wait. I want to put one of those on a funeral. She said, anytime you want to use them, you just call me. I called her for my first service after I left All Peoples. Oh, I said the name.
Yeah. I knew it was going to come out. I knew it was going to come out. You see how I did that, Jay?
The first service after I left there, it was at Higher D. It was a young man, one of my classmates, who was killed, who was shot and killed. And we put those sprinters on that service and took pictures of it. And that's how I got my first investor.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they believe, first of all, you stepped out on faith. Yeah, and you said something quite interesting, that you had no issue with the owner and, enjoyed working there.
Yeah, I definitely did.
Do you feel I know you said you felt like things should be done differently or could be done better, and you had a vision for it, but, it's hard to change somebody else's vision for what they want to do.
Right.
Do you feel like you were being stifled in some way? Or what was your actual feeling as to why you felt like it would be best to just go ahead and part ways? You leave.
I try not to be a person of conflict and discord. And I felt that as my own personal feelings were growing, that ultimately that's what it would lead to. And so I just felt like it was time, man. Like I couldn't, it was something about people. Okay, so like I told you, I never wanted to start a funeral home. But before I got my first investor, one of the owners of at that time, one of the largest Black funeral homes in Houston told me, you need to start your own funeral home. And for him to tell me that, I was kind of like, really? You think so? I was like, man, I don't have the means, the resources, the connections, any of this. He said, but you have clientele. Now, back up, keep in mind, at that time, my families or my clients were no longer calling on the funeral home phone, but they were calling on my cell phone for my services, which I felt like was another thing that kind of, you bring somebody up in the business, and then now their clientele is no longer calling on your phone, but they're calling on their phone, on their cell phone. So, it kind of adds a little, So once people kind of started telling me, and I got my first check, it was like, hey, it is what it is. Now, I will say this. I was able to leave that funeral home with nothing. I didn't take anything with me. I didn't leave and try to sabotage her business. I didn't leave and, try to cause problems for her. I packed up my stuff and just went on until the Lord gave me a place where I could go. And ultimately, when I left that funeral home, I was, out there in Fresno, Arcola, there's nothing but new development. So anything you want, you got to build it. And that's like $1 million building. So I looked at this one building. The first building I looked at, it was a former church. And I was like, man, I can't afford this. This is high. I think the rent was like $9,000 coming from a person who has no funeral home, or so.
Well, for clarity,
yeah,
$9,000 a month.
A month.
Yeah, okay. I want to be clear.
$9,000 a month. A month. So I was like, I can't afford that. So I left there in 2014. I rode around for almost 15 months looking for a building. When in December of 2015, I was approached by a pastor that I worked with and told me that he believed that he had a building that I may be able to work with. And so I said, well, just send me the address to the building. He sent me the address. It was the very first building I looked at. I was like, I looked at that building already. I can't afford that. He was like, man, listen, as our church grows, we really only need Sunday mornings for a place of worship, and you can have it the rest of the week. I was like, really? So out of that building, he gave me about 2,500 square feet in that building. And I left her funeral home with nothing. I started building. I started getting checks as they would come in. I sold my house, moved in with my grandmother, got rid of cars, started liquidating things, and put all the money that I had into the funeral home. From December of 2015 to March or to January of 2017, I worked in that building. I was paying rent in a building that I did not have any business for. Well, because you can't open up a funeral home until you're officially a licensed funeral establishment, right? So though I had a building, I had a lot of work to do in the building, and I had no clientele. I wasn't working really. I had funerals coming in or whatever that I would work through another funeral home, but I essentially had to sit in that building almost 15 months before I was able to do anything. And in 2017, I was able to open up.
Wow, man, such a great story, man. I think about going back to something we don't really like to talk about. Like I said, it's so morbid for so many people. It's very taboo. We don't like to talk about death.
Right.
And we're gonna always find that somebody in our family, somebody we know, and even ourselves are gonna, like Eddie Murphy said in life, we're gonna hit that upper room.
Yeah, for sure. Man, we are promised a lot. I mean, we aren't promised a lot in life, but we are promised death.
Yeah.
We're not promised a wedding. We're not promised baby showers. We're not promised birthday parties, but we are promised death. Yet it is one of the least talked about subjects that is had amongst families.
Yeah,
we don't talk about that.
And I know growing up, man, it wasn't something that me and my parents talked about. But I've had to deal with death in my family, particularly with my parents, twice. First time was so unexpected. My father, at the age of 59, had a stroke, and in 2002, and died. Little did I know, my father had no insurance and had no means to, or my mom at that point had no means to cover the costs of funerals. Now, keep in mind, this is back in 2002. I'll get to how much it may cost right now. But 20 years ago, it was expensive.
Definitely.
And now with all the inflation and stuff going on, I know it's probably, and we'll get into cost right now, but back then it was expensive, and my mom didn't have the money to bury our father. He didn't have any insurance, unbeknownst to me. And so with that being said, I had to pay. His son had to pay for the cost of the funeral. And I did that. Of course, I mean, it's my mama.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure she good.
Yeah.
It's my daddy. I'm gonna make sure he's
Definitely.
properly taken care of. But it should. My thought process at that time is I don't want to ever put my kids in a situation,
definitely,
because I didn't like that feeling. I didn't like that feeling on my mom.
Yeah.
And I definitely didn't like
It's
that
hard
feeling
on
for
them.
me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, wow, insurance policies are cheap.
Yeah.
You can get a $10,000-$20,000 life insurance policy, or say $20,000-$30,000 life insurance policy, and pay like $10-$15 a month.
Right.
To do that. I mean, hell, we go to the club and drink, spend about $20-$50,
and that's really a sad part of it, though.
Yeah.
Like, we'll see brothers with, Alexander McQueen's on, Gucci shoes on, and I'm looking at them. I'm like, brother, do you know that is your life insurance premiums for a year?
Yeah.
That's you wearing a year worth of life insurance premiums on your feet right now.
Right. There ain't nothing wrong with wearing it.
It's nothing, but make sure you're responsible and you
Right.
taking care of the other half of it, right? Because
Yeah.
you could walk out of that club in them Gucci shoes,
right,
and get shot and killed, which I've seen before. I've had clients happen that happened before, and then have no life insurance.
Yeah.
So now we're looking at GoFundMe's and fish fries and selling plates and all that kind of stuff.
Right. And I want to definitely talk about that. But going back to my dad, I mean, of course, paid for the funeral. But I said, hey, look, Ma, we're gonna have to make sure you straight. So I looked at all of her life insurance and to make sure her affairs were in order with her job she's working at the time, and then of course just period.
Yeah.
Hey, you have life insurance. I want to make sure you're good. And the life insurance, and I'm a former banker, and I used to deal with investments in life insurance. And one of the things I remember, never forget, this black lady told me, because I talked to her about the importance of having a policy. And she was like, how much is it gonna cost? And at the time it was probably like $10-$20 a month. She was like, oh, okay, well that's definitely cheap. And she's like, so what does that mean? Like, what happens when I get that policy? I said, well, upon your death, that money will pass on tax-free to your beneficiaries, whoever you name as beneficiaries, your kids or whatever. Oh, so wait a minute, I can't get the money? I said, well, no. I mean, this is called it's a life insurance policy. So you're basically insuring your life, that in the event of your death, money, basically I explained it like your life is a value.
Right.
And you can actually put a value, whatever you deem it to be, a dollar on your life that you would be able to pass on to your beneficiaries, whether it be your spouse, whether it be your children, your grandchildren, significant other, whoever. She's like, oh no, hell no. She said, she's like, oh hell no.
I've heard that before.
I ain't finna spend no money, man, for them.
I heard
what I'm saying? I mean, I'm gonna use that money for me.
Man.
And I was like, wow, the mentality that you have. So I made sure my mom's situation was straight.
Right.
And little did I know that a little less than 2 years later, in 2004, my mom would get severely ill and ended up passing away. 2 years later, in 2004, at the age of 57. And so in that, when she passed, she now had, because I knew that she had an insurance policy and it covered the cost of her funeral, and of course the other proceeds passed on to me as beneficiary, because I was the sole beneficiary in this case. But I didn't have to worry about coming out of my pocket to bury my loved one.
Right.
And like you say, do GoFundMe. Well, it wasn't no GoFundMe at the time, but now like a GoFundMe or a fish fry or selling barbecue plates and trying to rob Peter to pay Paul. And so how important is that? And how often do you see? I know it probably in your world, you probably have some solid clients, but I'm sure that thankfully, but I'm sure that you have encountered in your past life or prior to before being, or even probably in some instances now, families that are not prepared. What do you say about that?
I try to encourage families in the event that we were to have a family that is looking at covering the cost out of pocket and are not insured, and seem to be having a struggle with paying for them out of pocket. I'm always going to put them on insurance. I tell them at the table, I say, listen, right now, as we're sitting up here and we're wrapping this up, y'all can go on to globelife.com and get just get anything in place where you can have, if something were to happen to you, that you all will not sit at this table and be in that same predicament again. And when you actually show them how to, I think that a lot of problems we have is because people don't understand how simple it is to start the process. It seems like an overwhelming task for them when they start thinking about sitting down and getting insurance and things like that, right? A lot of them don't necessarily initially see the importance until they have to bury a loved one out of pocket, right? And so I try to talk to them, like letting them know, hey, man, get a $20,000 policy, get a $30,000 policy at least, just to cover the burial. But realistically, I encourage them to get, like, depending on the age of the person and the amount of people who are depending on them, I say, man, you at least need $500,000, $1 million policy, because life insurance is not solely to cover funeral costs. Life insurance is to supplement the income that the family is going to lose when you pass away, right? So if you're a 35-year-old man, you have 2 kids, you have a wife, y'all have 2 cars, and a house that you have a mortgage on. In the event that you pass away, who is going to cover that? Who's going to continue to pay that mortgage? Who's going to continue to pay those car notes? Who's going to help your children with the college fund? And when you start posing that to people like that, they're like, well, I'm like, man, you get up out of here and you don't have any insurance, man. How is your wife going to take care of your family? I said, yeah, sometimes I might interject jokingly that, that might mean that she might be getting remarried sooner than you would probably like her to be remarried. Okay.
Or him.
Yeah, it goes vice
yeah.
versa, because at that point they're looking at, you were making $60,000, $70,000 a year, and now they don't have that income anymore. So then what do? After they've spent $10,000, $20,000 on a funeral service, you got a $30,000 policy. What are they going to do with that?
Yeah.
So I try to pose it to them like that. The Bible says a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So not only is it to supplement income, not only is it to pay for funeral costs, but it's also to establish generational wealth. You can use that, man. Can you imagine getting $1 million policy?
Tax-free.
Tax-free. I've had some clients do it. I had one client, her and her sister got the money and opened a sonogram clinic. Man, can you imagine? And they did that back in like 02, 03. You know what I'm saying? Can you imagine what that has done for their family now? They employ family members at the sonogram clinic, right? And so I tell people, if you look at it like that, you may not reap the initial benefits of that policy because you are, of course, are the person that passes away, but how it cements your legacy. Like, oh yeah, granddaddy left us $500,000 and we didn't just take it and piss it out the window. We went and bought stock, or we went and bought, homes. We did multifamily housing. We paid for, some of the grandkids' college fund, all of this
Open
stuff.
up a business.
Yeah, I open up a business, and all of this is still linked to you. You're not here no more, but you get the credit for all of that.
Yeah, no doubt. So let's talk about, man, something that I also want to talk about, man. There are a lot of young people being murdered and killed today, man. Especially a lot of black.
I want to say this as you go into that, the rate of black men killing black men has exceeded the COVID rate at my funeral home. I'm burying more black men who are being murdered by black men than I am people who are dying from COVID.
Damn.
Oh yeah, it's gotten so. The week that I actually buried Mr. Floyd, that week it was like 3 of them. In the past, maybe since February, maybe 10 or 12 of them that have passed away from being killed by another black man. I had a 17-year-old who was killed at a birthday party. These are young men, and I feel like, I know it's maybe a little off topic, but I feel like the government has done this on purpose. Y'all are getting mad at the police killing, black men. So what we'll do is we'll just allow everybody to get a gun. Y'all will kill each other. And that's pretty much what is happening. They're just killing each other. I'm talking about 17, 18, 19-year-old men with pistols that are walking around with pistols. It's almost like you should be scared to walk around these days, because the young people, the scary people, are the ones with the pistols, and they will do some harm to you. So
have you ever, I've seen these videos on YouTube where, somebody was murdered, You know, they may have been in a gang or, you know, out there heavy in the streets. And some of the guys show up at the funeral, retaliation or have you had a situation like that happen at your funeral home or witnessed something like that?
I'll tell you this, because of the precautions that we take at our funeral home, in the event that we have a client who was killed in an act of violence, it's mandatory that the family pay for security at the funeral. So we're going to have police officers.
Why did you implement that?
Because it gave, two things, especially during COVID. A lot of churches were not opening their facilities for services, right? So we're having to rent other churches, and to give them a better peace of mind that we're not about to come in there and shoot this place up. We always have HPD officers, constables, things like that are going to be on site. This last funeral I did, I saw somebody comment online while I'm at a funeral, and they're actually frisking us at the door. And yeah, we were. We wanded. We went through your bag and everything. Yeah,
it's got that bad.
It has, because people no longer have the respect for funerals. Or the house of God. And so, I mean, you know, they'll come in there with their pistol, and it only takes a second for things to go left. So, you know, y'all can do all that on the parking lot, but if you come through the doors, we're going to have people.
Especially if you found out that, you know, there was multiple wives or gals.
Oh, man, I see that all the time. But you know what's crazy? They'll get in a fight and they'll throw hands.
Oh, really?
They'll throw hands.
Tell me the crazy thing.
Necessarily
come on now, just tell me some stories. Man,
I had a funeral service. It was for a young man who was killed. And all his girlfriends showed up to the funeral. And I had multiple services going on that day, so I jumped in the car and they drove me to the next service. I was in the back seat on our way to the next service, and I get a call that, man, they are tearing up the parking lot. I said, really? I didn't pay too much mind. I thought about it for a minute. I was like, oh Lord, they fighting at the funeral. I should have charged them more. So it wasn't until the next day when I got on Instagram and I saw that it had made it to a site like the Shade Room.
Oh, wow.
And you could see the sign from my funeral home in the back as these people are tearing up my parking lot.
Oh, wow.
And Brazoria County came and just shut it down. I was so embarrassed. I was like, wow. Like when it involves baby mamas and stuff, they trying to fight.
Yeah.
When it involves brother, they trying to kill. They trying to kill you. So that's why I said, you know, anybody who has been a victim of violence, we let the family know automatically. You gotta do security.
Wow. So I mean, any questions from the audience?
Yes, questions from the audience. In Texas, on average, it's about 25,000-30,000 to bury a loved one. Why is it so expensive to put someone in the ground?
Well, in Texas, I'll tell you the average cost of a funeral is going to be $7,000 to $9,000 before your cemetery costs and police escorts. Once you add that on, based on the pricing in Texas, as far as our security, as far as our cemeteries, the most popular cemetery that I refer everybody to here in Houston is Houston Memorial Gardens, which is where Mr. Floyd is interred. He's actually entombed there in the mausoleum. With their pricing plus your average cost of pricing, you're looking at about $13,000 for your.
So 13,000 includes burial.
For your simple service with your burial and police escorts, you're looking at about $13,000.
Taxes. That's okay. So 13,000. Okay.
13,000.
Some people still think 13,000 is expensive. Is that why so expensive still? We understand like the embalming or different. Right. Like we get the scientific portion. Why is it important to physically put somebody in the ground?
Well, it's not necessarily important. It's pretty much up to the family's preference, because we don't only bury African Americans. We have contracts with mosques and Hispanics and things like that. And every culture has a preference, i.e. our Muslim families that we deal with, that's going to be a same day interment, meaning that person passes away that day. Because of their religious beliefs and customs, the body has to be interred by sundown.
Okay.
And so in those situations, you know, they don't do any embalming. The family does a lot of the work themselves.
Gotcha.
When you get into your Hispanic families tend to have multi-day services, all-day visitations, things
Gotcha.
like that. When it comes to our African American people, we don't have a death culture, right? Here in America, We don't have a death culture. It's really it's a bunch of stuff that we've seen that we put together, right? So when it comes to us, we don't really know what we want to do. Sometimes we want to do direct cremations, and we say, hey, don't put all that money in the ground. When in all actuality, this is the average cost of a funeral. You can't call a funeral expensive, because this is what you see how much it costs to have a baby.
Right.
They charge you to wipe the baby off.
Yep.
Like, and nobody refutes those charges or rebuts those charges.
Right.
But when we get to the funeral, now keep in mind, Houston is the capital of Service Corporation International, which is the largest funeral service provider in North America. If you pass Allen Parkway, you're going to see an SCI building that's up there. They own your Earthmans, your Forest Parks, all of those. Anything that you see Dignity on is owned by Service Corporation International. Right now, if you go to Service Corporation International, their average cost of a funeral service, is going to be $14,000 around that before cemetery, before escorts. And this is technically the white folks' funeral home. I'm saying it like that, right? They don't complain. They go in there, one, because they're better insured.
Right. And they know cost for services.
It just is what it is. It just is what it is. And at those funeral homes, you're not allowed to come in. You know how we kind of what's the word? Negotiating black funeral homes. That's the best you can do. They don't do that over there. Ma'am, this is our price.
Right.
If you want it, we got you. If you don't, you might need to go down the street.
Right.
And that's how they handle it.
If you want these red bottoms, you know what I'm saying? This is what it is.
I tell people, even when it comes to like selecting a casket, because people are like, oh, that's a lot of money to throw on the ground. I'm like, man, you don't say that when you jump in your car.
Right.
Because everybody really could be driving a Prius. Why is everyone not driving a Prius?
Right.
It's because you want to ride how you want to ride, right?
Right.
So you have like caskets like the one that we put Mr. George Floyd in, which is about $65,000. That's going to be like your Rolls Royce of caskets, right? But then you got 20 gauges that are like your, Corollas, I tell families they're all going to get you the same place. It just depends on how you want to ride, right? Mm-hmm. And then also funerals are for the family. They're not for the loved one, for the deceased. They're a reflection of how we feel about this person and, how we're going to put this person away, right?
Gotcha.
So I wouldn't look at funerals necessarily as being expensive. It's a necessary cost of life.
Absolutely. Next question is, let's see, Crystal. Next question is, okay, so life insurance policy. A lot of us, old school, screen door, grandma with the screen door, the man would knock on the door.
Yeah, that reliable policy, that $10,000 policy.
For millennials who may not have life insurance coverage or not understand, like, I got time. I got a little bit of time. What's the best way culturally just to jump into this? A lot of millennials are skeptical of life insurance policy because what they've seen Big Mama go through or people on their job go through. Right. What's the best way for us to get over that hump and get insured?
I'll tell you this, when it comes to insurance and obtaining insurance, back in the day, Big Mama used to have one of the major companies was Reliable Insurance. And they would come by, and the disparity that I found was they would come to the poor communities and sell $10,000 and $20,000 policies, right? Mm-hmm. But then they would go to Bel Air and sell $100,000 and $200,000 policies. Hence why my great grandmother was 87 when she died, had a 30-year-old $10,000 policy that she was still paying on.
What?
Yeah. So that was, so when people look at that, they kind of look at it, they're like, oh, they're just trying to get your money. I said, no, what you need to do is you need to sit down with somebody and have a conversation. Call your funeral home, call your local insurance agent, call even, and ask them about the different types of insurance that is available. Because if you don't have insurance, it's just, I don't feel like it's a irresponsible not to have life insurance. So all you have to do is call your local funeral home, you can get online. We Google everything. We Google how much a person is worth. We'll be like, oh, I wonder how much they're worth. We'll get on there and go Google, how do I get a life insurance? And there are so many different types. I believe Mr. Boney even talked about a woman who said, well, I'm not going to get any of this money. They have life insurance policies now that add cash value.
Yeah.
That you can then at a certain age begin to draw from that cash value
Right.
to help with whatever you have going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's so many different, alternatives or different, types of life insurance, but you should definitely get in it.
Absolutely. Last question. In our community, not that we think we're going to live forever, but the conversations with our siblings, with our parents, with our children about funeral homes, life insurance, the idea, my aunt sat me down and said, let's talk about my will, and we all freaked out, right?
Oh, yeah.
So in our community, not like we don't know what's going to happen one day, we don't do well with the idea of preparing for someone's transitioning.
Right.
What have you seen helpful approaches that like start those conversations, or what can be helpful in families now, Black families navigating through those conversations?
Calling me in to talk to your family. I find that a lot of times, and this is not to be disrespectful, but as times have changed, it used to be Big Mama had the relationship with the people down at the funeral home, right? So she can call them by first name, call them, they know her name. It's still the same way. You guys have to now establish your own relationships with your funeral service providers. I tell people all the time, you don't have to go into in-depth detail about what you want to happen when you pass away, but at least let us know, hey, do you want to be buried or do you want to be cremated?
Right.
Like, give us a little bit, so that the family isn't sitting there at the arrangement table saying, I don't know if he wants to be buried. I don't know if he wants to be cremated. We never talked about this.
Gotcha.
So just start having those conversations or call someone in who you feel is approachable and relatable. And so I'm 34 now, almost 35, but anywhere I go and people find out what I do, it's going to be a plethora of questions. Like, they're going to be hitting me with them. So bring in somebody who people feel comfortable with asking these questions. One more thing I want to talk about before I forget. In the state of Texas, a life insurance policy has to be active 2 years before it is considered non-contestable.
Mm-hmm.
So for everyone who's sitting back and they're like, they want to wait till Big Mama gets sick. No, it's not going to work like that. So if you get a policy in 2020, and I saw this happen, it's crazy. I saw this happen with a family who, and thankfully they took heed to this. They buried one of their loved ones, act of violence, act of crime. After that, everybody went and got insured in that family, right? Like 19 months later, another cousin got killed, who they did go get insurance on.
Right.
The policy is contestable now. What that means is the insurance company reserves the right anytime before 2 years to then go back and ask you for 7 years of medical records. They want to make sure that you didn't lie on your application and stuff. Any pre-existing conditions that were not disclosed at the beginning. So you're like, hey, we got insurance. I'm like, yeah, you have insurance, but at this time it's contestable and the funds would not be available for the.
So we need to have these conversations while we're well and healthy.
Yeah.
Not when stuff starts declining.
Right.
And you're trying to cover it.
Right.
That's all the questions that we have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Great questions. And thank you all for tuning in to Real Talk Junkies and being so engaged as always. I was going to say, going back to what point you made relative to, being buried versus being cremated. One of the other things from an advice standpoint, and this is something that I did after my parents passed, is to actually go and buy or go to the cemetery. You mentioned Houston Memorial Gardens.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my parents are buried.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to Houston. I was already, of course, there, and me and my family, we went and actually bought plots, the plots in advance, so that burden of cost is not something that my kids will have to worry about. So that, whenever I hit the upper room, and this shell is still here, they don't have to worry about where the actual real estate.
Because it's going up just as homes are going up.
Right.
Houston Memorial Gardens, I believe right now they're like, for their simple section, it's like starting around $3,500. But if you just step across the fence to Paradise, which was a formerly Black-owned cemetery, formerly Black-owned funeral home, now they've been bought out by SCI. You go over there, their plots are starting off at like $6,000, $7,000.
But you can actually get those plots and actually put them on a payment
plans,
and pay them over time.
Right.
So
and
it's
then
not
all you have to pay is opening and closing at the time of death.
Right, the opening of the ground and them putting the dirt back on top of them and then lowering the body. So my thing though is I encourage people to actually go and get a plot.
Yeah.
If you know that your loved one is going to be buried in the city that they currently reside, then go find somewhere that you want them to be buried. If they're going to be buried in the hometown where they're from, go
have that conversation.
Right, have the conversations, and also to your point, it shouldn't have to be a situation where like, damn, I can't afford this. Go on, cremate them.
Yeah, man, I don't like that. I don't like that. Because what's crazy is actually the cost of cremation is going up too.
Yeah,
man, you used to be able to go to get a cremation for under $1,000. If you go to an SCI firm right now, their direct cremation is like $3,000 or $4,000.
Just to burn them up.
Just to burn. Put
them in the urn.
But what's crazy is I laugh when people do just like that. They say, "What?" You're talking about the cost of a funeral. I said, so would you rather pay $750 and not sure if that's your grandma plus one in the cremains? Right? It's like you get what you pay for in this. I tell people a funeral home is a business. Right. It's not a church, and a church is a business still. But this is a business, so you get what you pay for. If you feel like you're coming in here and you're just getting this, just crazy price that's so cheap, think about it. Who's going to be performing the task of this?
Yeah.
How are they getting paid? What type of mindset are they in while they're handling my mother?
Big Mama and them gonna be in that urn.
Yeah, it's gonna be Big Mama and them, So that's why it's great to get that insurance in enough time. Have these conversations ahead of time. I see someone asked on there about pre-planning and prepaying and stuff. You can go to your funeral service of funeral provider of your choice, sit down with them, pick out everything that you want to do for your funeral service, get a bottom line price. And if you then at that time decide that you're going to start prepaying on that plan, it locks in the price. So instead of, when I sold Mr. Floyd's casket, it was like somewhere around 50, 55, I think. Or it might have been 60. Now it's like 67, 68. If you were to lock in that casket at that 60,000 price range, and you start paying on it, you don't have to worry about inflation. But if you see it now and you be like, oh, I'll just wait till later, it may be 1,000, 2,000, 20, 30% more than what it is when you initially looked at it. So go ahead and pre-plan and prepay.
So what I'm gonna come to you and get like a little pricing or whatever, man. I want a digital reader sign on my tombstone.
Oh man!
I want a ticker tape parade.
Oh man!
I want a building named after me and maybe a street name.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna get you to put that package.
You need $1 million. You need $1 million.
I need $1 million.
I'm gonna tell you, coming to Fort Bend, if you're looking for your simple service, your simple funeral service, you're going to spend about $9,000 before your cemetery and police escort.
All right. Well, listen, hey man, I appreciate you. You've been a wealth of wisdom as I knew you would
Thank
be.
You. I
appreciate you coming on. Definitely going to have you on in the near future. How can people go check you out? Is there a website or something?
Yes, sir. If you guys are looking at me, looking for me, you can connect with me on Facebook, even though I'm tapped out of friend request. Bobby Fort Bend. You can also follow me on Instagram at Bobby Fort Bend. Also, we are on Facebook for the funeral home at Fort Bend Memorial Planning Center, as well as our Instagram at Fort Bend Memorial PC, as well as our website, FortBendMemorialPC.com.
All right, man. There's a lot of information. There's no lack of options to reach out and to reach Mr. Fort Bend, Bobby Swearington, and Fort Bend Memorial Planning Center. We appreciate you for coming on, man, and definitely for that information. And hopefully nobody will have to utilize your services soon. But if they do, they at least know that they'll get some good knowledge.
Definitely.
Thanks for being on Real Talk.
I appreciate
today,
it, Mr.
man. Right, that'll do it, man. We're going to get up out of here. Prayerfully, I'll be with you next week, and I won't be at Fort Bend.
No.
But we'll see y'all and holler at y'all next week, man. Stay tuned, man. We got a lot more great information coming your way next Wednesday, 12 noon Central Standard Time here on the Forward Times Facebook and Instagram pages. Peace, y'all. We out of here. Let's go.
All right.